So this is chapter 8, which dealing with the costing and more specifically product costing in the manufacturing company. Now, what are the cost methods that we have available to come up with the cost of our products? We have two methods. We have absorption costing and we have variable costing. What's the difference? The difference is how we treat manufacturing overhead cost, and more specifically, fixed manufacturing overhead cost. We already know that the product has three costs. That's direct material, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead. From the various analysis, we already figure out, and budgeting, we already figure out that manufacturing overhead has two components, variable and fixed. Now, that's where lies the difference between absorption costing and the variable costing. The rest of the cost are obviously period cost, which also can be variable or fixed. So, but since they're not product cost, we're treated as a period cost. So what we're going to do? Very simple. Under absorption costing, we're going to include in our product all the costs. We're going to include direct material cost. We're going to include direct labor cost. We're going to include variable manufacturing overhead cost and fixed manufacturing. The selling administrative expenses, variable and fixed, we're going to treat them as a period cost. They're going to be directly expensed. In the variable costing, we're going to split the cost only in the variable and fixed. And for the product, we're going to add to our product only the variable cost, which is direct material, direct labor, and variable manufacturing overhead. The fixed manufacturing overhead cost, we're going to treat it as a period cost. Means we're going to expense it like that. So for that reason, since variable costing has one cost less, most likely, or obviously, not most likely, obviously, the cost product cost of the variable costing will be less than absorption costing. If the cost of our product is less, then there will be some consequences for that. And we're going to see later what will be those consequences. So the first question is, which method will produce the highest value for work in process and finished goods? Obviously, not the variable costing, that will be absorption cost. Why? Because the cost of our product for the work in process and finished goods will be higher under the absorption. Why is that? Because the absorption taking absorbs all the cost, including the fixed manufacturing overhead cost. Where in the variable costing, that fixed manufacturing overhead cost is treated as a period cost. So, example here will be this company producing a single product with the following information. They producing annually 25,000 units. Variable cost, direct material, direct labor, variable manufacturing overhead. Selling administrative expenses, $3. Manufacturing overhead, fixed cost, manufacturing overhead, 150. Selling administrative expenses, 100,000. Now, what we have to do, we have to come up with the cost per product under the both systems, absorption costing and the variable costing. So we need some costs. We need direct material, direct labor, variable manufacturing overhead, which we have it, that's $10 per unit. Also, we need the fixed manufacturing overhead cost. Now, our fixed manufacturing overhead cost, but we need it per unit. So what we're going to do, once we see the fixed manufacturing overhead cost, we're going to see how many units we produce. So 150 divided by 25, we're going to come up with the cost, fixed manufacturing overhead cost per unit, which cost will be taken under absorption cost. And that cost is not going to be taken under the variable cost. So if we have to price our product, absorption cost is going to take those $6, which is 150 divided by 25, $6, and our unit cost will be $16 under the absorption. Under the variable, our unit cost will be only and only $10. The $6 under the variable costing will be treated as a period cost. So let's assume now that this company selling, now they're producing 25, but they sold on 20. And this is the first year of operation. They have no beginning of inventory. So what they did, they produced 25, they sold only 20. So the ending inventory at this point, we can easily calculate it. That's a 5,000 units ending inventory. Good, but we have a problem. Why? Because those $5,000 under absorption costing, we're going to have one value. Under the variable costing, we're going to have different value. And obviously, since the difference is only $6 between one and another, 6 times 5,000, that's going to give you $30,000. $30,000, we're going to have difference between the absorption costing inventory and the variable costing inventory. What else we're going to have a difference? We're going to have difference in the cost of goods sold. So let's see. If we have to prepare the financial statement of the absorption and the variable, and we have to compare those two, how they going to look like? Absorption, we're selling 20,000, $30 per unit, 600,000. No beginning inventory, we produce 25,000, but we sell only 20. So we have ending inventory of 5,000. But 5,000 is $16. That's going to give us ending inventory balance of $80,000. That means that our cost of goods sold are 320. On the operating expenses, we're going to see that we have a selling administrative expenses, variable cost, and fixed 100,000. That's 160,000. So our operating income is 120,000. If we have to prepare the same thing for the variable costing, we're going to have a different picture. Sales will be the same, but cost of goods sold will be different. Why? Because we have a cheap inventory. Our cheap with $6 per unit. So our additional units, beginning inventory is zero, but we produce 25,000 units at $10 only, 250,000. Now, our ending inventory is $5. Means that our cost of goods sold, variable cost and cost of goods sold is only 200,000. We're going to add the variable cost on the same administrative expenses as well, and that's going to give us $360,000 variable cost. After that, we're going to have contribution margin, 340,000. Once we deduct the fixed expenses, as you can see in this case, we're treating the fixed manufacturing overhead as a period cost, so we're expensing everything, and the same administrative expenses, we're getting operating income of $90,000, which is exactly $30,000 less than absorption cost. Why is that? That is because our inventory that we're holding is with $30,000 cheaper under the variable than absorption. As you can see, those 5,000 in inventory worth $80,000, where in the variable worth only $50,000. That's $30,000 difference. Where the $30,000 are in the variable costing, that are already expensed as a period cost. Where in the absorption, the $30,000 are held in our inventory. That's why under the absorption, the ending inventory is higher and the operating income is higher. Where in the variable, ending inventory is lower and the operating income is lower. Now let's see. This is the proof. So those fixed manufacturing overhead under the absorption, we have 30,000 in the ending inventory and 120 in the cost of goods sold. Where in the variable, the 150,000 are directly expensed. Also, what we can do is under the variable costing, operating income is 90,000. We have $6 per unit difference in the costing, 5,000 units available in the inventory, that's 30,000. $120,000 is on absorption costing operating. Now let's see what's going to happen second year when we're still producing 25,000 units, but now we're selling 30,000 instead of 20. So we're selling $5,000 more than our production, $10,000 more than the previous period. So what that means, we're going to bring the inventory down to zero. The costs are the same. Cost per unit are still the same because we're not changing production. Cost per units are still the same. And now let's see what's going to happen with the operating income under both systems. First system, absorption, sales are sales. Now, in the beginning inventory, we holding the $30,000 more compared to the variable cost. But in this case, we're selling everything. That means that $30,000 difference that we have is now released in our cost of goods sold and directly going to expenses. Variable cost is variable cost and fixed cost is fixed cost. For the same administrative expenses, those are directly expensed. Now, since we have $30,000 more in our inventory, those $30,000 going to hit us in our cost of goods sold. So that means our cost of goods sold will be $30,000 higher. So our operating income should be lower with $30,000. Let's see if that's the case. In the variable costing, our operating income 360, which is exactly $30,000. Why? Because now the beginning inventory here is cheaper with $6 per unit or $30,000. Now we're releasing that inventory plus the new production, everything is expensed. We're releasing the variable administrative expenses. We're releasing the entire manufacturing overhead cost fixed. and fixed administrative expenses. And our income 260,000. The only difference is the beginning inventory, which is cheaper with $30,000. So the conclusion that we can make is this. In the first period, absorption producing higher income than the variable. When we're producing more, selling less, or when we're building inventory. On the second period, when we're producing less than what we're selling or reducing our inventory, variable producing higher income. In total, both systems going to give us exactly the same result. Again, we cannot change the final number because it's the same information, just different perspective. What's the conclusion that we can make? Conclusion is, if our production is more than the sales, our inventory increases, which means that absorption costing operating income will be higher than the variable. When production is less than the sales, means we're decreasing the inventory. The opposite will be absorption is going to produce less operating income than the variable. And if the both production and sales are equal, there will be no change between the variable and absorption costing systems. Those will be exactly the same. And that's where I'm gonna stop for today.